Hello, good morning again. It's time for a second episode on the FAB Library widget that we were building in the last stream. And this time what I want to do is add common UI actions to it and show you through all of the buttons and configs that you need to click and enable and configure to enable common UI input actions in your UI, which are really handy for like gamepad versus PC. So let's take a look at that. So this is what we had in the last one. We got to this scrollable list of optimized tile view elements. We've got 1600 of them, but we're only drawing the amount of them that are actually on screen at any given time. We also have some cutting going on again at the bottom here, so I need to go in take a look at that just one more time. Let's do that quick. Now this item here, size box, yes, we could go to 200 and then enable that over here on our common view. The reason we have a scroll box in here and some other things is because we were in the last stream we were doing some performance considerations, and so we were testing those, changing the configs a little bit. Let's just take a look at this. Now we're actually seeing the bottom of the bar and we're seeing the bottom of this, which is good. Cool. I'm happier. I'm happier that this isn't cut off anymore. Okay, so we want to add input actions to these. I'm going to go ahead and just do that real quick. So we get the action, common bound action widget here. We could just drop that, say, into the bottom right. We have a design time key here, which we can use as a key. We can see it's a little bit too large. So let's wrap this with a size box and we'll just scale this down a little. And we'll just pop it off the UI edges. And now when we look, we should start seeing those. The reason we're not seeing it is because the name isn't correct. Input action widget. So the naming does matter. It doesn't give you an error, but it does matter. So now we can see it on every single element, which we don't really want. We only really want that on the ones that we're hovering. So I'm just going to change this size box here. Set visibility on this to collapse. We had this hooked up in the last stream, but we're not using it right now. And then on hover and unhover, I will show and hide that element. That should be good. Cool. So now we have this element that says if you press A, something's going to happen. Now, that's sort of the basis, and we'll look at the action bar in a little bit, which is that kind of bar that you see at a lot of the bottom of a lot of UI, where it says like press B to go back and A to select or whatever it might be, or press this other button to pop out a pop-up menu. We'll take a look at the action bar later, but let's look at how this works. So we have a common button base, and we have a triggering enhanced input action that it is set to display in the action bar, but we won't worry about that. We're also hiding the input if we're using the keyboard. If we turn that off and I move this around now, you'll actually see we get the enter key on here, which obviously we don't really need to show. So when we're using our mouse and keyboard, it's not there. When we are using our gamepad, it is there. So that's that setup. Let's go from basics. I've got a list here of all the things that are necessary to get to this point. And if you are interested in further reading, if you go and check out this YouTube channel here, I'm just going to bring it up. Have a look. So Mr. Boutier here, he has a pretty cool in-depth 1-hour video on this. I've watched this a few times. I bring it up when I'm doing common UI because you can't keep everything in memory. Whoop. So I did use also GPT to look through some stuff earlier today, which didn't really help as much as Mr. Boutier. So there's a whole bunch of things that need to be done in order for this to work. So first we go to our project settings and we go, in fact, even before that, we go to our plugins. And if this isn't already enabled, you just enable the Common UI plugin and also the enhanced input plugin. And then I think there is actually an element or a plugin for Common with enhanced, but I guess not. So once you've enabled Common UI and restarted your editor, first thing on our list there is the viewport. So change your viewport class to common game viewport. Tick that one off. In our enhanced input, we need to make sure that we have in our default class here, instead of the regular input, it's the enhanced input component, which I think is default now in 5.5, 5.6. So we don't have to worry about that too much. So we'll tick that off. We've got enhanced input. Another one that you can do is go to you've got a couple of places where the settings for common UI are held. The first one is in game, common input settings. And you can enable enhanced input support here. That makes sure that we can actually use our input actions from our mapping context with this UI. We need to set up an input data, but we don't actually put anything into this input data. So let's go take a look at that class real quick. It's extended from common UI input data. So you come here, create a new class, common UI input data. So it's this top one. And when you open that, we actually don't put anything in here. So there's no data in here because we're going to be using the enhanced stuff. So don't worry about putting anything in there, but that does need to be selected. And then in our platforms, all right, so that's our input data. In our platforms, we need, just ticking them all off. In our platforms, we need our controller data. So the way that this is typically set up is using the generic keyword here. If you use gamepad as default, it works a little bit better. Sometimes it doesn't work otherwise. And then we've got two controller mappings here. So let's go take a look at those. We right click and do controller data. You'll get this common input based controller data. And I've created two, GP for gamepad, KB for keyboard. So if we open one of these, you can see in here, I've just set up sort of the icons that I'm using right now, which are just the face buttons. And I've put the brushes in, I've set up their sizes. So that's all set up. Got a bunch of these laid out. And one thing that you do is you put generic in all of these keywords, and that just helps the system work out. So again, this is all just stuff that you can watch over in Mr. Boutier's channel. I'm just like rapidly firing through it for anyone who hasn't done this before. So that's the controller data. So we click that. Now we've got our input context mapping. So we know how to make those. We've seen that a bunch on stream. Input mapping context, create one of those. I've got a bunch of accept back, tab left, tab right in here. We just assign those into our input mapping context. I've got enter, bottom face button, escape as the right face button, tab left as Q or the left shoulder, and tab right as E or the right shoulder. So that's those set up. And then one thing that we create through Mr. Boutier advice is we create a miscellaneous data asset of the type meta, common mapping context metadata. And inside there, he says that you have to connect all of these per action input metadatas, which might be something that's necessary for shipping. So we can add our actions in here. We have left tab and right tab. I actually disabled these just to see if that was actually necessary. It didn't seem to do anything before cook time, but maybe something happens at cook time. So we've got this asset. What do we do with it? When we open up any of our action mappings, we can pick a mappable context down here or mappable key setting. And again, we can set the name that we want to see in the UI. We'll see that in the tab list, in the action bar, sorry. And then we have selected the metadata here. So I think it plugs some metadata through a system, but actually when I removed all of the inputs from here, it still worked. So maybe it fills it at runtime, but we can do some testing in a little bit. So we've added that, we've set that up. Another thing that we need to set up, let's have a look here, mapping context, sweet. Well, actually, we're not quite done with the mapping context yet. If we come in here and go down to enhanced, let's look for enhanced input here. Where would it be? Enhanced input here. What Mr. Boutier does is he puts his IMC default in his case, but I'm putting it as UI. And we register it with the user settings, and we put it as a default mapping so we don't need to worry about it. But typically what you can do is you can put that into your common activatable widget, which is a type of widget that you can create. When you go to widget blueprint, you can create a common activatable here, or just type it in, common activatable widget. So that creates your widget that will handle all these input events for you, take your mouse when it needs your mouse, take your gamepad when it needs your gamepad, things like that. So over in our project settings, which have now disappeared, and we had that enhanced input here. Yeah, we can set that up. And there's a couple of tick boxes that you can play with here, but that's pretty much the setup. Now, time for the action widget, right? So you can create a couple of things. You can right click and create a user widget here. If my bottom bar would go away, create a user widget. You can create a common bound action button, and you could also create a common button. And this is all in the long 1 hour stream that you can see from Mr. Boutier as well. But basically the way it works is that there is a text underscore action name and an input action widget. And these names are important. When you compile with these incorrectly, it will actually spit you an error. In some cases, not in all cases, because it's the Unreal way. But if we come in here and do this as A, and rename this as A, and then compile this, you'll see here a required widget of text action name is required there. Okay, cool. Compile that. Now we have that. This input action widget actually doesn't tell you anything, but is also important. So in fact, if we go A here again, you can see input action widget here of type common action is available, but it's optional binding, but it's not been done. You can actually see it in these bind widgets here. So you can see that there. So let's rename these back again. Compile this, go to our other action, look at this. We've got the ability to create a common action widget called input action widget. And this is from C++, I believe. So the parent class here has a named required bound widget or optional bound widget. So we have our action widget in here. So we can see what that will do if we just stick a command in. It will look like this. So we might want to wrap this with a size box, do some other things, but that's your sort of basic setup there. So this is a common button base. This one is a common bound action button. And the difference is that a common bound action button is used in an action bar. So let's create an action bar. Common bound action bar. We'll stick it at the bottom of the page on the right hand side, and we'll give it, say, 50 unit offset. We'll center align any elements. And we need to pick an action button class, which is the one that we had created. It's the what I've called CBA, common bound action button. And it's the one that gave us the errors earlier if we don't have the things correctly written. And you can give it a style. I've got a generic button style. I've got a couple of generic styles actually. So I've got this common style generic border, common style generic button, common style generic text. And what I've done with those is I've gone into my project settings. I've gone to my common UI. I think it's down towards the bottom. There's 3 more common UI setup areas here. So I've gone here and I've selected these 3 as my defaults. We can actually take a quick look at these other ones. There's no setups in here, and there's no real setups in here either. But these common styles, they're just created by going to Blueprint class and typing in common style. And then you have border button, text scroll, and text style. So those are the 4, but I only really need 3. So we have that set up. This is a common text type. which means it takes a common text style, which in this case should just be the generic style, which actually isn't set here. So we would set that. And then the idea is now I could go and change this common text style and it will change across the game wherever I use this. So if I say, oh, actually the text just needs to be bigger everywhere. Now it's bigger everywhere, or it needs to be green, or it needs to be a different font. So we can change all of that through, you know, we could go to Librium or whatever that is. That didn't work. Let's try this one. That didn't work. Let's try this one. That also didn't work. So I guess it doesn't work very well. Or maybe those fonts don't have actual fonts in them. So anyway, so we have that. That's cool. Oh, it's because the style got removed. Now I can show it. Text style, please. Librium. There we go. So it sets it up there. Let's go back to Roboto. Compile that. Happy days. Please keep your style. I guess it doesn't want a style for whatever reason. Maybe I'm doing something in a construction script somewhere. Or maybe, I know what's happening. So the button actually defines text styles. So you actually have to put the text styles in here. Boop, 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 boop. So this is like normal, hovered, selected, normal, selected, hovered, and then disabled text styles. So what was happening was it was reconstructing and changing the text through the C++ class, through the bound widgets here to update the text style based on the button. So yeah, now that that's set up, now if we go and change the generic text and just take a look at any UI that holds this widget and then change it to a different font style, it will actually update in the viewport, which is nice. Cool. So that's kind of the reason why we want to use common UI, or one of the reasons. So we have this common bound action bar, we have this common bound action button. And if we actually press play, you'll see at the bottom right, you have the accept with the little icon in it. So it will show you any bound action. So if we came in and said, let's actually replace with a common button, maybe. Or say, let's wrap it with, I guess we'll wrap it with a common button, maybe, if we're allowed to, which we're not allowed to. So let's just make a common button, which we cannot do. So let's make our own CB action here. And we'll put that into our horizontal list. So we have this action, we'll come down, we'll say, cool button. Actually misconnected this, so let's put that there. It's from an old asset that I wrote. Okay, so now we have our cool button. The style is, you know, questionable. It doesn't have much of a style. It's not like it's got this button style. But if we wanted to take this style and stick it into our generic button, we could turn off this single material, which is what I'm using right now. I showed that in the last stream. And we could actually put the style that I just copied and paste it, ideally, into here. And now you can see we have a button in here. Issue is my text is white, so it's not a great example. I'm going to go back to single material, which for me is a transparent material. That was just a use case that I had earlier. Going to pad this off to the right. Let's say this was activated here in the triggered enhanced input action through the back key. Should be the case now. You can see the B button at the top there, and you should see it at the bottom right as well, because it's a bound action that's on this page. Our elements in the middle of our screen have a shown or hidden action that we set up at the start of the stream through hovered and unhovered. We have another button on the screen that just does something else. It's the cool button, it's the B button, it could be the back action, for example. And in fact, the name down at the bottom right is derived from where we set up some of those names earlier through the metadata. So that is a quick overview in sort of 20 minutes of some of that stuff. So action widget, action bar, default styles. We've gone through everything in a pretty rapid fashion. If there are any questions right now, for the 4 people that are with me, You're still with me. Good job. Then open to questions. I'm just going to delete all this stuff because I don't actually want it. I don't mind this one. This one's pretty cool, but I don't really need it at the bottom right in this scenario, because why would you need both? Randomize. Let's do 5 assets. Bam. UI. Use the Pro Icon Survival Pack with the Niagara renderer. Some dead trees. And do some free mocap hordes, I suppose. This is intended to be a game jam randomizer. High quality buttons with the dungeon pack. Survivor. That's actually quite a good one. Except the except the super forest, but we will save this. This is a pretty good generator. Anyway, yeah. So I hope that was helpful. I just wanted to get that off my chest. That was just something that I wanted to do at the end of last stream, just show some common UI stuff. So we have that. We can pop these open. Let's go and take a look at this. And it would open it up in our on my other screen. So anyway, thanks very much. See you in another potentially interesting video that might teach you something cool. And just to recap, super cool channel. Go check out this guy here. Actually, I'm not subscribed. Let's subscribe.
Hey, in this video, we're gonna be going over the.
See you in the next one. Cheers.